Call me Kelly. That's what I tell all of my students. Well, I don't have a doctorate. I actually have an MFA, which is a Master of Fine Arts. It's also a terminal degree, but you only get to be called doctor if you have a PhD or a JD or an MD. So Kelly is fine. That's what I tell all my students because the majority of my students want to be filmmakers, and I myself am an independent filmmaker. And so I tell them, I'm on this journey. I'm further down the road than you are, and I'd like to bring you along with me, and you can come up and meet and walk with me. So we'll be on a first name basis. Well, I had an introduction, but I think Ruth did a great job there, so I'm just going to move forward. Okay, so I was also thinking brief history because it's just impossible to put the entire history of special effects into one evening, or let alone maybe 1 hour. I don't know how long I really have tonight, how much has been allotted to me, but I probably have at least an hour's worth of material. So I thought, how about in a nutshell? All right. Basically, history of all of it is too big to cover in a short lecture. I could easily spend an entire semester on it. And I actually hope to develop a class in the near future at Western for our new kinetic imaging major. In the meantime, tonight's lecture is, I want to go about introducing some basics, some concepts of filmmaking that you may or may not know that will actually help provide a conceptual framework for how special effects work. I am mainly a production person, so I'm always thinking in terms of how can I make something that's not real look real? And pretty much all filmmaking is some kind of special effect. So quick little shout out for the kinetic imaging major. This is upcoming, recently approved. It's going to be in the art school at Western. It's a new Bachelor of Science degree starting in the fall of 22. Animation, game art, video art. Basically, we're going to have the ability to learn special effects skills in computer-generated imagery, motion graphics, motion capture, and sound design for film and video. So we're really, really excited about this new major. What are special effects? Okay, well, often abbreviated SFX, SPFX, F/X, or FX. I tend to just abbreviate it FX. Really, all films rely on some kind of special effect to create the illusion of reality. Most films you're going to see, contemporary films today, are going to be combining both practical and digital effects, and I'll be explaining the difference tonight. Some effects are much more complex than others, and good effects should be invisible. Right? You should not notice that they're happening. You should believe in the world that's being created. Yes?
We should also mention that there are some examples, though, that, that Hollywood kind of, while there are good films that have, like, special effects, keep in mind that some studios are too reliant on CGI.
Oh, I agree. Oh, my gosh.
We have to address that because that can also be a big downfall.
It's like if they don't do enough, it doesn't look real, but if they do too much, it looks too unreal.
Exactly.
I think a film can be spoiled by too many effects, yeah, right? Exactly. I think you need a balance, just like all things in life. Right? Okay, so special effects, all film has to do with your perception of reality. What is reality? Compared to a painting or a drawing, we think of the camera as something that reproduces the world faithfully. Like something about it being mechanical, it's implied that it's reproducing reality or truth. Now, most of us know that there is no objective truth, so we have to start to question, okay, what is reality? If the camera makes something that looks realistic, it's still not real. It's a picture of it, right? But our perception of it being real, because it was mechanically reproduced, or good special effects that look like photorealistic reality, this can all be used to a filmmaker's advantage. So it's your perception of reality that is important. Reality versus special effects. This has to do, closure is a concept where human beings have a built-in need to complete information we perceive as incomplete. We're constantly performing closure all day long. So if we see something that kind of guides us in a certain direction, we will jump to those conclusions and we'll start to understand what's happening. Suspension of disbelief. This is often a really good example of suspension of disbelief is often a stage play. If you are sitting in a theater and up there just a few hundred yards from you, you can see the actors walking on the boards in this proscenium arch, and they're reciting their lines and they're wearing costumes, and you're fully aware that it's not real, but somehow you can be transported by the emotions and the play and begin to realize, oh, and you suspend your disbelief. You forget about the stage. You begin to get involved in the emotions of the story. So we're also doing that in film. Suspension of disbelief, the viewer's willing to go along with the illusion, especially for the sake of enjoyment. Yes?
It's not just also acting on front stage. It's that when this is a certain case in, when they're doing stunts in action films, they have to make it look real, like,
right.
They have to bring in the actual actors, but of course, if they're older actors, they then use a stunt double. But most of the time, it has to look real. They have to bring in the
well,
real
absolutely,
actors.
but
They
even
have to get the moves right.
Well, I guess if I'm thinking about the concept of suspension of disbelief, it's not just that it looks like real truth, like it happen every day in front of you. It's also, I'm willing to believe that there is such a thing as Hogwarts and witches and wizards, and I'm suspending my disbelief for the sake of that story and that enjoyment, even though I know that those things don't exist.
Real, and if it needs to look real, and the actors need to be real. It can't just be CG fake.
Right, exactly.
Because if you bring the actors on set, it makes it look more realistic than, say, use it all digital.
Absolutely. I have a few quick slides we're just going to run through some of the highlights of special effects origins. These are just some of my favorites. There's so many films with special effects, and I have a handout for you at the end where you can do some further research. But this is one of my favorites. I don't know if anyone recognizes this one. Jason and the Argonauts. I remember watching this on Creature Features back in the 70s when I was a little girl, and my brother had control of the television. So we were always watching Jason kill things. Oh my gosh. Oh, that would be amazing to see a print of this, right? 2001. 2001: A Space Odyssey. This is the year I was born, 1968, and this is a real favorite film of mine, mainly because of the realistic version of space. So finally, there's this portrayal of how space would look, of weightlessness, some major innovations done on 2001. The Exorcist. I remember this from my childhood as well. I wasn't allowed to watch it, but I saw bits of it when they were playing it on HBO, and my parents were like, no. Really, really scary film. An example of mechanical effects and excellent use of makeup and practical things shot at a time when we didn't have computer-generated possibilities, right? And things, maybe we didn't show everything, and that made it more scary because of our imagination. Okay, Star Wars: A New Hope, of course.
Yeah, this is, of course, I'd like to explain, because this is the studio who did this changed it.
Absolutely, everything changed after this film.
Industrial Light and Magic,
Magic.
who did this film, would not not only later do the other films and the Star Wars films, but also, you know, transform
Absolutely. And it is this and blockbusters during the 1970s have changed everything, spawning, as we said, industrial light and magic and a whole slew of new techniques. And then later, George Lucas goes on to, in the later films, actually creating the computer programs that are going to help do CGI as we know it today. But probably the most important sequence in A New Hope, Star Wars A New Hope, is the trench sequence where Luke has to basically blow up the Death Star, and all of the work that went into this, and just the logistics, thinking about, you know, how many hours, hundreds of hours were spent to create these practical effects because computers were not what they are today. Another big film, American Werewolf in London. This is special effects makeup extraordinaire. I just watched the scene again. I'm not going to show it today, but oh, it's horrible. Does anybody remember this film when he turns into the werewolf? So we've got just a little frame of it here. Blade Runner, just a key film for scene design, changed everything. You know, it's often referred to as a film noir. That's in part how it was edited for the theatrical release, but also just how dark all the sets are, this rainy, dingy futurescape that was created. Jurassic Park, of course. We couldn't leave this one out. Steven Spielberg, an innovator in so many ways. I could have just as easily put Jaws 20 years earlier, but I've included Jurassic Park because of motion capture. You know, they have people in dinosaur suits or half dinosaur suits with dots all over them, trying to figure out how they would move, and then putting the CGI over the top. And then Toy Story, Pixar, and the first entirely computer-generated feature.
And that, of course, would later take over the market for future animated films.
Right. I think I think there's some really good examples of stop motion animation that have come about since, but there's a lot. This is the standard now for a lot of animation.
That's what I mean by the early 2000s.
Yeah, and then Avatar, more motion capture, wearing suits, getting the motions right, and then applying the animation over the top. So, I mean, that was like a really quick run through of some basic techniques. Here's a little shot of Hal. How does, let me see, go that way. How do special effects work? Well, in order to understand that, you have to understand how film works. And that's why I said today I wanted to explain a little bit more about the frame and about our perception of motion in film and how that works to begin with. So in order to explain the concept of persistence of vision, all you have to do is like look around to the room at a point that's bright, maybe my face, and then close your eyes, and inside your mind, you should still see the light, right? And for me, this light's really bright, so it's showing up for me. But if you look over here somewhere, you know, you'll see the pattern. Whatever you just looked at, you'll probably see it there for a minute, right? There's like a latent image that stays in your mind once you close your eyes. Why does film appear to move? Well, it's based on this latent image. It's based on how the human eye functions physically in the real world. We see something, you close your eyes, you can still see it, you can imagine it, you can remember it. A mental bridge is formed in the mind. Again, we have closure, that human need to complete missing information. Now, if you take a series of still images and move them quickly, our standard frame rate is 24 frames per second. Each image has a slight change from the one before it. As the next image appears, the latent image remains, and the two are blended in the mind. Now, to show you an example. Where'd I go? Okay. I have, if you don't want to touch because of COVID, that's fine. But if you like, I have some flip book examples, and you can take a look. And then, do you know how to do this?
I think so. Of course, the thing is,
so you go like this and flip. See? Okay. Yes. So we have a few, and we can just pass these around, and everybody can get a chance. So you may remember these from childhood. Okay. Here you go.
Before all this bringing the visual effects to life, the most important thing is for the filmmaker who is making the film. They have to
you can trade the different ones.
They have to have the idea brought into their head.
If anybody wants.
Before they bring the effects to the screen, most important thing is having a vision of outline of what it is. They usually.
Here, it's right here.
They lay it out first before
they do a storyboard. Yeah. Well, okay, so I want you to look at this book. What's your name?
I'm Brendan.
Brendan. So take a look at the book, Brendan, and flip through and notice how whatever book you have, the images appear to move, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's because each successive image, now if you were to just very slowly look at each page, you're going to see that there's only a slight difference on each image, right? This is how all film and video works. It's actually single frames.
Yeah, and interesting
okay.
How maybe less than a minute, how many people it takes to do just one scene.
Right, and I'll get to that. I'm coming to that, okay? So, frames, I know you do. So here you go. We can pass the box around and people can put them in. So, okay, so you got this concept, you got this idea that as long as the next image changes a little bit, you're gonna get motion, right? So the frames are created. I brought an example of, this is my Junker camera. Normally this would have a lens on it, right? But I've taken the lens off so that I can show you where the frame happens. Now, I would put some film in here, and film would be back here. I open this shutter, and you can see there's a rectangle there. See how it's like this? Okay. Whatever light came through the lens would hit the film and burn a rectangle right there. Then I would move the next frame over and do it again. Okay, now this is a single still camera, so I'm doing single shots, burning each frame. Well, for a motion picture camera, all I would need is a motor and a way to move the film while the shutter's closed without having to do it by hand, right? So the motor does that, next frame happens, okay? I just keep making them. And if somebody in the shot is walking by, then each one of those shots is gonna be slightly different, right? And then I could play them back and it would look like, to you, it would look like somebody was walking by. So light tight box with a lens. There's a shutter in there. The frame is exposed. Now, that's our old school film. Here's some examples of sensors. Because of course now we have digital cameras, right? So we no longer have to put film in the back of it, but we are exposing a sensor to the light that will reproduce the image. Okay, so the frame. So that's what we understand as the frame, and we refer to frames per second as FPS. Standard film speed is 24 frames per second. If I make 24 frames of me walking by and then play them back in 1 second at 24 frames per second, it's going to be really fast, right? In order to have me walking all the way across the room that, take a few seconds, that's quite a few frames, right? but it's all single still frames happening in succession, just like your flip book. And they're going by the latent image from the last thing you just saw hangs there for a minute, and it all blurs together for you. So you think you're seeing things move. Just for trivia, 12 to 15 frames per second, if I played it back at 12 to 15, it would appear very fast. I'm sorry, if I shot it and then played it back at 24, if I had at least 48 or more frames per second, it would appear as slow motion when I played it back at the standard 24. Okay, framing of a shot. How do I decide what goes in the rectangle? So if I'm thinking about any kind of special effects I'm going to do or any shot I'm going to do, I got to plan out, like you were saying, I got to come up with some kind of storyboard thinking about what's going to be in each shot. Framing is a process where I'm determining what's going to be in the borders of that rectangle. There's a lot of things to consider when you're thinking about framing, and things that you would consider when you're thinking about the special effects that you're going to have to create. So implied proximity to the camera, depth, camera angle, height of the camera compared to what you're shooting, scale. This could be size within the frame. Camera movement. Is the camera moving while I'm shooting, while all those frames are going by, or is the camera stationary? Okay, I have some examples of a few different types of shots from things that you might recognize. So from Seinfeld, we've got an example of an establishing shot. So anytime Seinfeld was going to be in the restaurant talking to somebody, we would start with this shot outside so you knew where you were going to. Next shot would be them inside. Okay, here's another establishing shot. All right, created with special effects. This is from Star Wars New Hope, the opening scene.
Yeah, the opening scene over Tatooine.
Yep.
Oh,
do you know what this one is?
Yeah, that's from Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire.
Harry Potter.
When we're first introduced, to the first task of Tri-Wizard Tournament.
Yeah, because look, we've got the stadium here and then the castle in the background. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of depth going on in this particular shot, and also special effects, right? Because most likely there is no castle, right? It's either a matte painting or a miniature, depending on what we need to look at and what we need to shoot. But you've got foreground, middle ground, background, even further away. Yet this is just a 2D surface. It's amazing what they can do within that one rectangle.
They are on a different set.
Oh, here's an example of a long shot. Usually the difference between an establishing shot and a long shot is there's a person in it, right? We have foreground, middle ground, background. We can see where he is. Here he's coming through this pathway. Okay, here's a shot from Into the Wild, another long shot. We have our main character appearing very small in this landscape. If you know anything about this film, well, I don't want to spoil it for you, but he is lost. And so here he is very, very small in this wilderness, okay, conveying quite a bit of meaning. Medium shot, okay, Katniss. Medium shots usually midway, torso, up. Okay, in this case, she's a little low in the frame, but that's to get the entire bow here. And we can see that she's preparing, she's hunting, right?
It was in the open.
Yeah. Okay, here's another medium shot, also a two shot. Two people are in it, but it's a medium shot because you're getting a lot of the torso. Another two shot, another medium shot, okay, from Titanic. Over the shoulder, this is also a two shot, but in this case, we have two characters having a conversation and we're seeing over one person's shoulder. This is a close-up. Now, this is not a medium shot because it doesn't go all the way down to the waist. It's here, right? So, and it's close enough that we can see some of the emotion on their faces. Another close-up. Okay, very beautiful. Extreme close-up. Now we're coming in and we're really getting that emotion, because human beings look for emotional cues on each other's faces. So anytime you want your audience to feel along with the character, giving them a close-up or an extreme close-up is a way. This is from the film Get Out. And then here's another extreme close-up. Right, exactly. Good job. Good job. Okay, here's Harry once again.
Gringotts trying to get the whole book.
Yeah. And then one more.
Right.
Okay, really extreme. Yes, exactly. Shrek 2. Very good. Very good. Okay, so I want to talk about some more things about the frame here. Pattern elements of size, shape, direction, and attitude. And these can be really useful for special effects, because you're depending on where the camera appears to be, where items within this frame appear to be, is going to give a sense of depth and help to create an illusion. Okay, so size is really just relative size. So whenever you have no other information, anything that's bigger in the frame is going to appear closer to you. Anything smaller, you're going to feel like it's farther away. This is a little harder to tell because they're all lit so well. This one, due to the shading, you get that receding feeling, right? So this seems like it's closer. That smaller one is farther away. Shapes. We experience shapes in the world all day, all the time. It's part of how we make sense of our entire visual field. But when we're talking about it in terms of looking at a film frame, we make sense of what we're seeing simply by the shapes we see. So here's some triangles, rectangles, and squares. Oh, wait, hey, it's a house, right? We recognize that, and you can do it anywhere, looking around at other rectangles, and your brain is doing this without your knowledge. You're just perceiving these things because you've learned it since you were a small child. Direction. Direction can be used within the frame to create depth. One of the most obvious is three-point perspective, right? So we get the sense, again, this appears larger, or it's larger, so it appears closer to you. Things get smaller, they appear farther away, but also the idea of these converging lines into the distance, this gives you the sense that you could almost walk down or take the train down these tracks, right? It's another example, a really classic example of the Last Supper. Okay, so three-point perspective, everything is pointing to our main character, Jesus, right? So excellent use of composition in one frame. Direction, sometimes it's just lining things up, okay, where you get a sense of vibrant movement. And with nothing else going on in this frame, it's just, wow, this goes on forever. It looks like it's either snow or it's the Black Rock Desert or something out in Burning Man. And then use of direction to create a feeling of emotion or vibrancy. So this is really someone, I think it's actually like, seems to me like it's a subway dome or something, like maybe they're waiting for a train and they looked up and took the picture this way, just so it looks like he's screaming with the scream lines happening.
And there have been many examples of this in film.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So these are just, now that you're starting to recognize them, you can look for them all the time. Attitude, aw, little puppy. So attitude has to do with where the camera is pointing. So I can make a character seem smaller by putting the camera high and looking down. So the point of view of the camera is creating, our sad puppy here, and then maybe looking up. Our puppy is looking at a master and wants to play, right? So you get a sense of dynamics and power of the different characters. Compositional principles. Closure, this idea that human beings have a need to complete incomplete information, whether that is, your best friend forgets to call you and you start thinking, wow, maybe they don't like me anymore, right? from that to simply understanding, oh, well, that's a circle. Even though it's not fully a circle, there's a sense, like there's enough going on that you can mentally see where that circle is. Figure ground. Figure ground is another one. Can be used to create depth. Now here's closure, but it's also figure ground. Closure, because I don't look at this and say, oh my God, half her face is missing. I say, oh, someone is standing behind this foreground, right? This leaf is in front, and I can imagine the rest of her face behind it. I put that incomplete information together, and I don't panic. Here's another example of figure ground. It's like, which one do you see? The cat or the mouse? Both. Sometimes, if you look at it for a long time, maybe it'll vibrate, right? Another figure ground. Okay, again, I bring this up because it's a flat 2D surface, and we're wanting to talk about how is depth created. Well, I understand that the tiger's face his part of his head is not cut off. There's some palm fronds in front of him. He's hiding. He's probably going to jump out and eat me, right? Or maybe, well, does he look calm or angry? Calm or angry. Also, a little bit of foreground. Here's Kitty hiding, thinking he's hiding, and some background. Okay. And then grouping. Grouping is just how I put all of these things together. All of the elements, the pattern element, size, shape, attitude, direction, the compositional principles of closure and figure ground, all of these are kind of happening in every single shot. And how am I understanding one particular thing out of that, all of those elements going together, and I'm grouping them together to understand it. Okay, one last thing. Depth of field and focus. Selective focus and rack focus can direct audience attention. And part of this has to do with the real world. So I want you to do a little experiment with me. Take your hand, stick your arm out, all right? And you're going to put your thumb in front of someone's head. If you have to turn around, or you can use my head, whatever you want to do. But you want it to be far enough away, so I might be a little close to you guys. But if you look at your thumb and then look at the person's face. Look at thumb, face, thumb, face. See how your attention jumps. When you're looking at your thumb, it's in focus, and everything else is out of focus. When you look at the face, now your thumb's out of focus.
Yeah, especially when you're watching big films in general, that is a key part, especially when you're watching big blockbusters in general.
This is the biggest thing that my students want to learn. How do I make that background blurry? Right? They don't understand why they need to do it yet. Well, you need to do it because selective focus is real life. This is how the masters are helping to direct your attention and make you look at something by focusing on a particular thing and letting the background go out of focus, or focusing, further into the depth of that image and letting the foreground go out of focus, right? It's showing you where to look simply by placing focus. That sounds like an easy enough principle. It's actually really hard, because when you've got your camera and your lenses, and depending on the lighting, there are all these factors that affect how much focus you can actually have. And depth of field is the term for the range of distances from the camera at which the subject is acceptably sharp. Now, thankfully, you're not going to be tested on this, so you don't have to memorize that definition like I make my students memorize. But here's my funny little stickman chart of what that actually means. The range of distances from the camera, okay, here's the camera. There's my subject. Oh, there's some background. There's going to be a tree behind him, right? And we're outside. There's the sun, okay? And I'm pointing the camera toward the person, and I want the eyeball to be in focus because I want everybody watching in the shot. I want them to look at the eyes because that's where I want them to focus and understand emotions, right? So I focus on the eyeball. Any given setup, light is a variable, the lens is a variable, where I place that focus is a variable. There's going to be a certain area, not just the point of critical focus, but an area ahead and an area behind. And these are just sort of kind of imaginary lines, but there's a place where that focus extends. Now, it's super, super really focused at critical focus. Somewhere in this area, it still looks acceptably sharp. It looks in focus to our eye. Somewhere right here, there's always a space between the lens and this sort of forward moment where it's completely out of focus. Like I couldn't, this is why sometimes if you've ever tried to catch a ladybug on a flower with the wrong lens, you can't get her, you just can't focus her. You'd have to have a macro lens. You have to have a particular lens that will allow you to focus that shortens this distance, but there's always a certain amount of distance that will never be in focus in front of that lens. So this is our forward area. We call that circles of confusion, where it's all blurry. Then there's a moment where it starts to be in focus. We got this whole range, and then on the other end, we've got another imaginary line, and focus falls off. Now, there are charts in the American Cinematographer's Manual that the cinematographers refer to so they can do their setup, figure out what the special effects are, get all the lighting. You got 92 people working on this one shot, and they look it up in the chart, and it's like, okay, we got this camera, this amount of light, we got an f/22, and we got this particular lens, and our focus is 10 feet away, and we know what our forward value and our rear value is. So we could tell our actor, it's okay for you to walk around in this area. If you come too far forward, it's gonna fall off. Every once in a while, you can see a mistake in a film where an actor will just sort of nose out of their focus. And you can kind of see their eyes start to get, and every so often it gets left in a film. It's very rare because they spend so much money, they're not gonna allow these kind of mistakes to go out. But
there have been incidents, or
there are
cases of incidences, like with Lord of the Rings 2 Towers being one example.
Well, I'd love to know where that shot is. Maybe you can tell me at the end. Well, there's plenty, and I know I see them every so often, and you kind of have to get the trained eye for this. But anyway, you've got a set of focus, okay, and it can change. That's what I want you to get, is that the amount of it can change based on the amount of light and the situation. Here's an example of a shallow depth of field. So somewhere here, well, if I'm going like this, somewhere here, if the camera's here, somewhere here is the forward line. This is in focus, and then somewhere back here, it falls off so that everything in the background is out of focus, okay? Deep focus. So one of the most famous examples of deep focus is from Citizen Kane, and everything in this shot, everything in the foreground, the middle ground, and then all the way back to infinity, okay? It's not super sharp, but Kane, young boy, is back there. He is where, actually, Orson Welles wants you, and Greg Toland want you to look at all of this, right? But see this window and how everything's bright. You're definitely supposed to notice that the young boy is there as the adults are discussing his future and making the decisions about him. It all has to do with the meaning of the scene, and it's this incredible amount of depth of field. And it truly is a special effect, because to get this shot, they had to plan out and consult those charts and decide, position everybody so that they could achieve it, so that they'd all be within that particular range, okay? It's happening on all shots. Any time, I mean, I can tell you, I've taken a few photographs where I have no idea why it happened. I was like, oh my God, I got it. And then as I learned how to deal with f-stops and I learned how it all worked, I was like, aha, okay, less light, I'll get more shallow depth of field. I can do something, it works, right? So it has to be set up.
Was that from Citizen Kane?
Yes. Citizen Kane, the shot where they're discussing his future and he's like a 7 or 8 year old boy, right? So it's early in the film.
The movie's famous for depth of focus.
Right, exactly.
That shot with the short
Yes, absolutely. They have to measure everything out, figure out where it's going to be. And since this is a set, they can just move stuff and build it, right? It's not something you're going to just achieve by going out into the real world. Sure, this works in reality, but the camera doesn't reproduce that unless you figure out the physics of the lens, the light, the f-stop, everything. Okay, so that's to impress upon you the amount of work that you'd have to put into one single frame. We have the ability, if you know where that depth of field is, you could actually pick it up and move it within the same shot if you did the math right, like if you figured it out. So rack focus is pulling focus. I can change from the thumb to the head to the thumb, right, in the shot. Okay, it guides our attention to a new, clearly focused point of interest while blurring the previous subject. So in this shot from Devil's Backbone, here we have our young man hiding from this person, right? Rack focus, right? The series of shots edited together. Well, in this it's two still things, but it would happen within the same shot in the film, okay? So it's helping to portray an emotion in this case, right? Dear viewer, here's where I want you to look because this is what the character's thinking about. Oh, relief, or I'm hiding, right? Okay, major types of special effects. This is by no means an all-encompassing list, but certainly we know about computer-generated imagery, right? Motion capture's on there. Matte painting. Matte painting was really, really big in the past. Now they still do it now. They're combining it. Maybe they're doing paintings in the computer, or they're rear projecting things. You're still putting two different shots together and compositing them. Stop motion animation, prosthetic makeup, chroma key. Chroma key is where they use blue screen or green screen in order to insert something in a particular element.
Yeah, exactly. To make, because they cannot physically create the same. The actors are just, performing. While they're on the set, they they have to just imagine stuff is there. You have to
exactly.
You can't really think about it. It just has to become fluid.
Exactly. So again, the effect to us as viewers appears invisible, right? But the actors have to act without someone else there sometimes, right? So it's very difficult.
You have to use your imagination. You have to just pretend like it's there, or
Yeah. So well, here's an example of a practical or mechanical effect being created in the Star Wars universe, okay, combined with optical printing. Once they photograph certain elements, they pack the film strips together and print them. This is back when we were using film. Now we have digital motion capture, okay, combined with visual animation, CGI, computer-generated imagery, to, we get the sense of the shape of his face. We can make all of these marks. We can go back, take that image into the computer, and begin to draw on top of it. So we're actually combining something that happened in the real world with our animation, so we get a more realistic product.
This will later be used with Josh Brolin for Thanos.
Right. So special effects are labor intensive. I guess that's sort of my point, and a lot goes into composing the frame. It's not reality, right? They can make things look very, very real, and now they're making things look so real that are actually impossible in real life, floating, dodging bullets, Matrix, like things that aren't real, but we're kind of becoming so used to it that we're beginning to imagine that space. It's almost like an otherworldly dream area that is sort of speaks to our desire to let go or be untethered, right? There's a lot of films that do that. All special effects have to be created frame by frame. Okay, if it's 24 frames per second and your average film is 2 hours long, 7,200 seconds times 24 frames, 172,800 frames. Well, if you've ever noticed, a lot of the animated children's films are about 45 minutes long. Okay, well, okay, what's your average child's attention span? Plus, it's just a lot of work. So whether you're creating a hand-drawn animation, like on the flip book or any even Toy Story that's going to be computer-generated animation, you're going to have to make every single frame. Now, the computer makes repetitive tasks faster. So if I only need to change something by a little bit so that as the frames go by, each one changes just a little so that I can see, I will see that apparent or perceive that apparent motion, that computer can make it faster to do that. And then we have hundreds of people working on the film, right? We break up into separate teams and we set things up so that we break up the tasks and the work will go faster, right? So it's a combination of those two things.
Yeah, it takes, hundreds of people just to make just one sequence.
Absolutely. It's crazy how much time.
Less than a minute it just takes hundreds of people just like maybe less than a minute or so.
All right, so I picked two clips. These are two. Well, the first one is a real favorite of mine, and but I wanted to give you a content warning if that's okay. Somebody needs to stop me. It's okay. All right, so we have some adult language that's going to happen in these clips. So the first one I want to show you is from the Terminator, and then the first Terminator, and then 10 years later, Terminator II. All right, so I'm going to get out of this and jump over to okay. This is a little long and I'm running short on time, so I'm just going to kind of...
Have people seen this film?
Spoiler alert. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I've seen it.
I won't show the whole thing. I'll just show a little bit, okay? I'm just going to show a little bit. Okay, so this is an example of practical stop motion, done by hand in the first Terminator. You can already see that we're combining live action so that we have the actors doing their shots, right? And we're editing it together with this stop motion animation of the monster, right? The Terminator, who at this point, all of his skin's been burned off, right? So he's just a skeleton now. And here he comes. Right? Let's take a look at Now, in this film, they also had to, because no one was there, right? So they also had to act without the monster actually chasing them, right? I want to skip ahead a little. Let's see if, I don't know exactly where it is, but.
Yeah, it's like I said, they have to use their imagination.
Yes. I don't know if this is too far. No.
Run! Run! Come on, motherfucker.
You can even see how it's cut, right? So he swings and it's not, we don't see it meet, right? Not necessarily. don't want to spoil this. How many people have seen the original Terminator? You should definitely check it out. Even if it's been a while, it's worth it, because when you begin to think about how many frames they had to create by hand, because the computer didn't exist to do this in 1984. So this is all influenced by this film. Okay, I'm going to cut into the middle of this too. So there's a scene from Jason and the Argonauts where these skeletons, I'll jump into here. The skeletons rise out.
Destroy them! Kill! Kill them all!
Hand, stop motion, animation. Combined with live action. Let's get a little more action happening. See if I can...
And more!
Oh, there he goes. Okay, so it's blatantly Terminator paying homage to Ray Harryhausen's special effects.
Okay. That guy falling off the cliff, that when they shoot those kind of things, they usually land on a bat, like a
Yeah, so it was all safe. Absolutely.
Yeah, so there is no, falling off a cliff. Everything else was done in the editing process.
Absolutely. Okay, so here is an early sequence in Terminator 2 when Sarah meets the new Terminator. Well, so this is 10 years later.
Wait here.
Hurry up! You kill us all! You kill us all!
Homer!
You kill us all! Mom, are you okay? Mom!
Come with me if you want to live.
It's okay, Mom. He's here to help. It's okay.
Okay, here we go. The new Terminator.
Go!
Kind of dark. You can't see quite what's happening. He's shooting him, right? And here we go.
What the fuck is going on?
Get down!
you're gonna have to watch the film.
Yeah, you're gonna have to
I remember
watch
being
the
a
film
kid
to
and
find
came
out.
out. I was like, oh my god, he won't see the thing. Oh my god.
Yeah, we
Let's
waited in. We waited in line to go on opening night for that film in '91, and I think we were in line for like 10 hours that day to go see it in the theater. And because I remember I was a huge fan of the original, and then when this came out, it was like they're doing it again, you know. So yeah, this is a big deal, but completely different type of effects now at a time, you know, just a few years later, where they could use the computer to render things and make these liquid-like animations, really, because that's all it is animation.
Yeah, and of course, that was another example of ILM.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think this is about the end of my time. Okay, I have, just put this fully up there. Okay, so I have a handout, darn it.
Oh, I forgot to get this back to you.
Okay, thank you. Here, let's go. Okay, further reading. So I made a little handout because, like I said, it was kind of hard to smash everything into. Can you pass those along?
Yeah.
So I've got some. Here you go. Here we go. No, it's all right. Here you go. That's okay. You're gonna share. Okay, wonderful. Here we go. So a couple little things I wanted to share with you. So I looked up some resources. I have some interesting books listed there, but I also, on the other side, there's sort of like top 50 special effects films according to this website called the AV Club. I don't know anything about the AV Club one way or the other, but I thought the list was pretty good. So then I looked them up. You'll see an asterisk next to everyone that Portage District Library has the DVD of. So there's that. If you can't find something, Melcat. I don't know if you guys know about Melcat. You can look it up and get it interlibrary loan. Or Just Watch is a really great site for looking up things that are streaming. And then my last slide. Do you have any questions for me?
I'll wait till after.
So don't be shy, guys. Try with me. Any questions? I think this was fabulous.
Oh, thank you.
Because, I mean, not only did you show us the special effects and how we can appreciate them more now, knowing how much work it takes to go in there. My daughter just watched Citizen Kane for film class for Western Michigan, and she hated the film.
It's hard. Look, this is the thing I tell my students, though. I'll show them something, you know, for their own good, right? This is a classic you have to watch. Well, it's too slow, or it's not. I didn't like it, and I'll say, I don't care if you liked it. You're not here to like it. Out in the real world, or everyday world, yeah, you go to films for entertainment, but we're at the university. We are studying it, so you should be able to watch any film, whether you like it or not, and start to understand, analyze, deconstruct, take it apart. Especially older films, especially films you don't understand because they don't seem like what you're used to, because that's going to give you insight into our culture in a particular time period, right? And that is so important.
That's what people tend to forget these days. That, of course, technology isn't always helping the future. It helps us look back at the treasured memories of the past.
Excellent point. Thank you, Brennan.
I learned about.
If you're watching a really boring movie, you start watching What's the Lighting Like? One angle.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's so much fun to watch something like Jason and the Argonauts and just be like, oh my gosh, remembering it in the past, but also, seeing what they did.
What I like is special effects spawning other special effects.
Yes.
Like with Star Wars,
Star Tours in Disney World.
Yeah.
They wanted to do Star Wars, but they're like, the tech doesn't exist. We're gonna make it. We have to make the tech to make the ride for the super techie movie.
Yes. Well, I mean,
I just thought there was brilliant, just spawning all these other innovations.
well, and I, like they say, necessity is the mother of invention. When you have an idea for something that you don't know how to do yet, you figure out how to do it, and it creates new things. Like, I mean, what are all the things we got from going to outer space? Tang. Right? Like, there's such this innovation when we're trying to do something, and I think our culture becomes enriched by it.
It's just fun when you got that kind of ripple effect.
Absolutely. Well, Star Wars is such a huge influence on our culture. I don't think there's anybody.
Yeah, exactly. And now I want to rewatch Terminator. I forgot how.
You gotta. It is, and it's so good, and it's actually really a feminist film. If you go back and look at it and see Sarah, it's absolutely. And I have this whole theory about James Cameron. I actually want to do a book on this. That James Cameron is a feminist. Look at all the female characters in every one of his films, and the prominence, and how he grew up with his mom, a single mom.
So we definitely need to invite her back for another
I can talk for an hour about James Cameron. He's one of my favorite. Yes.
And then you have the special effects that spawn real life, like Star Trek and the communicators spawning the cell phone.
You know there were some geeky engineers going.
I say Star Trek is why phones used to do this.
Yes, exactly. I had that phone.
Look at a special effect and go, I can make that hold up.
Yep. Yeah.
The Fitbit for the tricorders.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, it was really great.
Well, if you guys wouldn't mind, let's thank Professor Wittenberg by giving her.
Oh, thank you.